Now, I'd like to invite our next speaker for our discussion on climate and EU business regulations, Antoine Colombani. Antoine Colombani is a member of the cabinet of First Vice President Frans Timmermans, focusing on the Green Deal related policies. Mr. Colombani, a very welcome to our event today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the stimulating presentation also of Chiara Martinelli just before. Indeed, the effort sharing regulation is a part of this wider package called the Fit for 55 package, which you have introduced. Which itself is a part of a wider political strategy called the European Green Deal. And I'll just start by saying a few words about that, because it's a whole of government approach with key objectives, of course, achieving climate neutrality by 2050 and protecting biodiversity and ecosystems, as well as decoupling growth from resource use. And the idea is really to tackle all these three challenges in a coherent and comprehensive way, while also ensuring that social aspects are at the heart of our policies and the fact that the green transition has to be a just transition, otherwise it cannot succeed. And I'd like to emphasize as well that the Green Deal is a growth strategy. It's about setting a new direction for growth. It's about re-embedding our economic system within nature, recognizing that there are planetary boundaries. Now, of course, today I'm focusing a bit more on the climate part of this agenda. The Green Deal is based on clear targets and timelines, in particular the target of reducing our GHG emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And this is a target that is now part of a legal framework in the EU. It's enshrined in the EU climate law. It's legally binding. And it's a key step, obviously, towards climate neutrality and keeping the temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. And for this, as was said before very well, we need concrete measures. And this is where the Fit for 55 package comes in. So the Fit for 55 package is bringing together a policy mix of targets, for example, a new target for energy from renewable sources of 40% by 2030, as well as reinforced targets for energy efficiency. But not only targets, but also regulatory instruments, carbon pricing instruments, but also more, I would say, normative standard regulation. And it's also about investment, and we're contributing to that at EU level through the EU budget. Now, a big part, an important component of the Fit for 55 package is the reinforcement of carbon pricing, in particular, reinforcing the existing emissions trading system, which will be adapted to our new climate target, and also we want to make increased use of it in sectors like aviation, extend it to maritime transport, introduce a carbon border adjustment mechanism, etc. But what is happening outside the realm of the current ETS is also crucial, of course, and this is why we have this instrument called the effort sharing regulation. So it consists of national targets for emission reductions for sectors which are outside the scope of the current ETS. So that includes road transport, heating of buildings, agriculture, small industrial installations, waste management, etc. So that accounts for about 60% of emissions. And we propose to reduce these emissions by 40% compared to 2005 levels. instead of the previous target, which was of 29%. So it's a significantly higher ambition, of course. And this is turned, as I said, into binding targets per member state, spanning from 10% to 50%, depending on the member state concerned. And this is based on basically a fair sharing of the effort. It's based on GDP per capita, of course, but also with some adjustments to take into account the cost effectiveness of emission reductions. And I'd like to mention as well that this effort sharing regulation is also supplemented by a regulation on land use and land use change. The situation is not good there. The EU carbon sink has decreased by 20% between 2013 and 2018. And we propose an EU target for carbon removals by natural sinks, so for land, forestry and agriculture, of 310 million tons of CO2 by 2030, instead of the current obligation to stabilize the carbon sink, essentially. So now going maybe a bit more into some of the sectors, at least, of the effort sharing regulation. It would be difficult in this short time span to give a comprehensive view. But I want to say that, of course, to achieve these targets for effort sharing, some of it will be for the EU member states to do. Each will have their own target. But we also set up a number of instruments at EU level to help get there. And in particular, we propose to create a new separate emission trading system for road transport and buildings, two of the most important sectors of the effort sharing regulation. And this basically would allow capping emissions in those two sectors, which are not currently on the right track at all, and introduce a carbon price signal. But pricing will not be enough. We need regulatory measures, we need public support, and this is why those sectors remain subject to these national targets under the effort sharing regulation. And the creation of this new system, I'd like to also mention that this would go hand in hand with the creation of a social climate fund to redistribute part of the proceeds to help the most affected households install, cleaner heating sources, insulate buildings, fund cleaner vehicles, and also possibly directly support their income if member states wish to use that possibility. Now, in the road transport sector, in addition to this, we need regulatory measures as well. We propose new CO2 emission standards for cars. So this means that average emissions of new cars have to come down by 55% in 2030. And by 2035, new cars put on the market should be zero emissions, as I said, by 2035. And we also put, as part of the package, obligations for member states to set up charging points and infrastructure for these zero-emission vehicles. For example, every 60 kilometers on highways for electric charging, there should be a charging point every 150 kilometers for hydrogen refueling. So we're really putting forward a comprehensive set of measures, also with targets, renewable targets for transport, etc. In buildings, we also have increased targets for energy efficiency, specific requirements for the public sector, public buildings to be renovated each year. And we propose also new regulation on the energy performance of buildings. Basically, as of 2030, all new buildings must be zero emissions. And for existing buildings, we have proposed new energy performance standards requiring that the worst performing 15% of the building stock, the current building stock, in each EU member state should be upgraded. So in more technical terms, from grade G to grade F by 2027 for the non-residential ones, and by 2030 for residential buildings. Of course, more will be needed. For meeting these effort-sharing targets. In particular, to make renovations happen at a sufficient pace, we need to basically double the current rhythm of building renovations in the EU. We need to reach a rhythm of 2% per year at least. So that needs to happen also through, public support schemes at national, at local level. And we ask member states to draw up national renovation plans that include roadmaps for phasing out fossil fuels in heating and cooling by 2040 at the latest. So these are some of the measures in those two sectors. I see that you're...
Just a gentle reminder as the time is up. I do apologize to interrupt.
Sure, I'll conclude. So I've given you maybe a zoom into those two sectors, which are significant sectors under effort sharing. I'd like to say, maybe to remind that, these are proposals by the Commission. These are being negotiated now and discussed by the European Parliament and Council. We hope that we will go as fast as we can. Of course, the climate clock is ticking. There's no time to lose. So we hope that by the end of June, the Council and Parliament can adopt their positions so that discussions between the institutions can then start. And all elements of this package are linked to each other. We are all bound by this minus 55% objective, so we'll need to preserve the coherence of these measures, their credibility to meet that target, which is now a legally binding one. But I think I've given you maybe a short overview of how we are using a mix of pricing, incentives, regulatory instruments, to show that we don't only have a climate target, we have actually the measures to get there. And when this Fit for 55 package is adopted, we'll have, I think, for industry, for investors, full clarity on the regulatory framework. And that should be a key enabler for investment and to make change happen on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Antoine, for your insights. Really appreciate it.